Hope everyone's having an amazing day so far. And if you are where I am in New York, it's starting to get light. So hopefully the sunshine, well, lack thereof, but the daylight brings an amazing start to the day for you. Good morning, good morning.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings to you too. And I see we have some folks joining us on Zoom as well. So good morning to Adam and good morning to Io. And welcome to everyone as they come into the space. Good morning.
Good morning, Rio.
Hello, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Hope you all are prepared as we are in the pre-start minutes. Just remember to have something to drink so you can stay hydrated, and if handy, a pen and paper. Trying to keep you all on your toes today. Morning. All of you in Facebook land, good morning, good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ria.
Oh, whew, what to say? So today it's pouring and I'm not a fan of the rain, but I do welcome all that the rain has to offer. It's a busy morning in my house already, if you can believe it, with kids going back to school and everything. So just getting my daughter, who is not so little, but a very, very prominent teenager, out the door and getting ready to dive into this session of communication and then work after. But enjoying all of that as well. I keep myself a little bit too busy sometimes, but I love it. Keeps me on my toes. So hopefully, yes, rain is good for plants and grass. Absolutely. It's good for us too. I said to myself the next time it rains that I was going to go dance in the rain, but it's not happening right now. I do want to actually do that, live out my movie fantasies of being able to get that done.
Wake up, everybody. It's time to get up. Wake up, everybody. It's time to get up. Stay woke. Stay woke. Stay woke. It's time to get up. Stay woke. Stay woke. Stay woke. It's time to get up. We're healing, we're dealing, we're growing. Together, together, releasing. We're teaching, we're moving. Together, together, we're learning, discerning. We're striving. Together, together, we're leading, connecting, transforming. Together, together.
You're muted, love.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Réal Hamilton-Romeo, and I'm really excited to be here with you today for communicating with clarity and intention. I am a publicist and I use my intuitive capabilities in my day-to-day job. I am also an adjunct communications professor, so communication all around me. So I like to merge the two aspects of my life, hence communicating with intent and clarity. Today, I want to take you all through just some brief tips about how we can get clearer and more intentional with what we're communicating to try to minimize misunderstandings and make sure that what you're saying gets to the person to whom you are speaking. And with that, I would like to welcome all of our participants from Facebook. So good morning to everyone on Facebook. I'm really happy that you all can join us today, and welcome everyone who is in the Zoom space. If you haven't already, just make sure you have something to drink, and then also a pen and a piece of paper or something to write with and something to write on, whatever your druthers is. So I'm just gonna dive right in. We're gonna have a really good interactive session. I love feedback. I love when people participate, and this session was put together with that in mind. So I hope you came to play and enjoy. So without further ado, we're gonna dive right in. So it goes without saying that whatever I share today is going to be probably stuff you've already heard before, already know, may have learned at some point in your life or career, but sometimes packaged together, it helps to bring it all together a bit more. So what I will say off the top, communication is super important for every single person in every single relationship. And something that I learned a few years ago is that 85% of our happiness or success can be attributed to our communication skills, which if you think about that number, it's wild, but it makes sense because the better that you can communicate and share and effuse and be able to be open with people is the less stressed you will be. So it does lead to better happiness and overall success. So whether you're in a romantic relationship, parent-child relationship, platonic friendships, professional relationships, whatever it is, communication is going to be the main factor of each of those relationships and will warrant some type of success. So I will say, and will get to know me very intimately, and I will be sharing a lot of my life. I do it all the time in every aspect of my work and everything else, but it was communication that eventually ended a relationship that I was in for 11 years. And it's why I had trouble with my parents when I was younger. It was just I found it so difficult to actually share what I wanted to say because I didn't want to hurt people's feelings. I didn't want things to not go my way, and I didn't want people to not like me. And then I got older and I was like, wait a minute, there's a way that we can do all of this and not have to worry about anything, any of those things happening, especially if your intention is pure and not malicious. So what we're going to go through today are some steps with, as I mentioned, of how to communicate with clarity and intention. What I want to make sure that everyone gets out of this is that they understand the interpersonal communication process, helping you to say what you mean as well as meaning what you say. A lot of times we talk and we say things and people are like, wait, that's not what I meant, or wait a minute, you didn't understand what I meant. So we want to make sure that we get that across, especially as we communicate with clarity. So my first question that I'm going to ask everyone is, on a scale from 1 to 10, how happy are you with the way in which you currently communicate today? So I want you to think about that for maybe 20 to 30 seconds and then drop a number into the chat. So again, just to reiterate, on a scale from 1 to 10, how happy are you with the way in which you're communicating today? So I'm seeing some 7s, 7.5, 7 to 8. And just remember, there are absolutely no right or wrong answers. So no matter what you say, it's your honest feeling of how you think your communication is going. And to help you kind of determine that, I want you to think of like your last few conversations that you've had with anyone and just think through what the response was or the reaction was, and then that should help you out a little bit to determine. So I'm seeing some 6s, some more 7s. I'm loving the honesty, everyone. So keep it up, keep it up. Few more in the chat, few more in the chat. 5, okay. See an 8, awesome. And now for the person who dropped the 5 in the chat, sorry, I didn't see your name scroll past me, but are you comfortable unmuting and sharing why you think you're currently at a 5? And it's a safe space. I don't want you to feel like I'm calling you out, but I just want to hear from your perspective what you think is, what you think you could improve upon.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. I think that I chose 5 because, and I just jumped on, so I just saw the question and I just answered off the top of my head. It might be higher than that, but for me, because I don't feel as though I'm being authentic in
Okay.
my communications, that I'm not communicating effectively. Sometimes I don't feel as though I'm being taken seriously, mostly by people that I'm working with.
Okay.
So, and then when it comes to my personal relationships, I know that I struggle with that, and I have to constantly be in my head checking myself before I speak, because I don't want to speak out of turn or to be controlling,
Got
which
it. Okay.
issue for me. And in my personal relationship with my mate, with my husband, I'm not always straightforward about how I'm feeling, and I'm always wondering about how he's feeling. So I'm not allowing myself to be completely open.
Okay.
Okay, so that's
Well, thank you. We're going to get to, I'm glad, thank you so much for sharing. And what the reason why I wanted to know is because I wanted to see where I should steer the conversation. And I do have an example along those lines from my personal life that I will be sharing in just a few minutes to demonstrate some of the ways in which we can open up that opportunity for intention to come through, as well as clarity. Okay, so what I want to show you all next is the communication model. Anyone who has taken a communication class at some point, you may have seen this communication model, and it is, I don't want to say it's like the very basic communication model, but it definitely opens things up and shows how information is sent and received and all of those things. So that way we can start to understand where people are coming from. So if my handy trusted admin person can put up that communication model slide, please.
Do you want to move forward?
Yes, please. Okay, so this model here is a model that has been used time and time again to demonstrate the way in which people communicate. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have a sender. On the right-hand side of the screen is the receiver. Usually the sender is encoding the message, and messages get encoded, or information that we want to share, based on who we are, the backgrounds we have, so culture, any types of experiences, languages we speak, all of those factors. And then somewhere in here, just before the message gets through, are any barriers to communication. So that could be language, distance, etc. Same thing for the receiver, except the way in which they understand and receive messages and decode them is based on their own experiences and language and everything else. In between, what we have here is going to be any type of noise that is taking place. So that could be physical noise, that could be noise in the channel, that could be environmental, you name it. It's just anything that could disrupt where we are in terms of communicating. It can also be the channel that you're dealing with, technology issues, anything like that. So usually the sender gives the message, it goes through the channel, filters through any type of barrier, any noise that's taking place, filters through their noise for the receiver as well. And then the receiver will give feedback to the receiver. So it could go something like this. The sender has a message, and then say the sender is Tim. Tim wants to say something to Mary. So Tim is thinking to himself, ooh, Mary, I always see her going to McDonald's and eating with friends, and I'd like to be out with Mary. So Tim says, hey, Mary, do you want to go to McDonald's and have a burger with me? Mary is sitting there and she's thinking to herself, well, Jessica told me that Tim has a girlfriend, so I don't know if what I want to do is go out with someone who has a girlfriend, so I'm going to let him down easy. So then Mary says, I'm so sorry, Tim, I really have to be home with my family tonight, so I really can't go to McDonald's and eat with you. Tim hears that, and Tim is like, oh, I didn't know Mary was so old, you know, and she has kids and everything. That's kind of crazy. So now in this message right here, we can already see Tim wants to spend time with Mary, and Mary's like, I don't want to spend time with someone who's in a relationship, but that was not communicated to Tim. So even in there, we see that the intention is a bit murky. She wasn't very clear in what it was that she wanted to share. And we can already see that, you know, problems in interpersonal communication can originate from the process of message transmission from Tim to Mary, and then from Mary to Tim. So now what we want to do is make sure that that doesn't happen. And usually between people of like, and that was a very basic example. So between people of the same culture, what we see is sometimes there's less of that dissonance or misunderstanding, but sometimes there can be. And again, it all stems from how people give out messages and receive messages. And whether this happens the way it's interpreted depends on how comfortable the message sender or receiver is in giving information as well as receiving. So what now, if we could go to the next slide, I want to ask all of you is, how do you communicate with intent? So feel free to drop that in the chat, or open up and make sure, drop that in the chat, or you can open your line and speak if you're so comfortable. So you can share what you do or give any ideas for how you think providing that intention in communication happens. So take your time, think for a couple of seconds, and share how you think you can communicate with intention. Don't be shy, don't be shy. Okay, so while we wait for some responses to come in, I will say this. When we're able to enter conversations and be clear about our purpose, it allows for better connection than disconnection. Someone, Io says, you have to be clear about what you want to say. Zakia says, I would say it starts with knowing what I want to share. Okay, that very much is the number one thing, knowing what it is that you want to say. Whenever, and someone says, Jacqueline says, I can say what I mean instead of filtering to the message due to my assumptions about the receiver. That's right. I think for me, what I've noticed is we do have to think about the person with whom we are speaking or the audience that we're speaking to, but we should always try to strive for authenticity. Sometimes when we come into conversations unaware of our aim or our goal or how we want to impact the relationship, we tend to say things that can create dissension. Wendy says, when I'm the receiver, repeat what you hear for clarity. Yep. And then what you do is you want to think about it. So oftentimes we don't have the opportunity to think about what we want to say, but when you do have that opportunity, give it that chance. And what I think sometimes is when I'm not in conversation, what I can do is think, and I tend to be very much in my head a lot of the times. So I'm doing a lot of thinking about how can I better this, how can I better that? And that often helps me when I have the opportunity to think on my feet. So honestly, most people don't feel connected when someone approaches them defensively. So when someone comes to you or you're speaking to someone and they're very defensive, you feel like there's not going to be a connection here because I can't seem to break through this barrier. I will give you an example from my life. It actually happened on Thursday. So a week ago today, I had something crazy happen where I was talking to a friend of mine, and this friend happens to be an ex, but we are really good friends, or so I thought. And we were having a conversation, and when he opened the conversation, we usually talk over video chat, and when he opened the conversation, the first thing he said after we said like, hey, what's up? He was like, oh, I'm so tired. And I noticed he was in his car, which already video chat car. Yeah, bad scene. But he then said, I'm so tired. And I was like, oh, are you heading home or are you heading out? Because in my mind, I'm like, oh, you're tired. So if you're heading home, my next thing that I could say is, well, at least you're going home. So you have an opportunity to rest if you can. But if you're heading out, hopefully you can rest wherever it is that you end up. And this is where the conversation took a turn for the worst before I even knew it. He then said that he said, I'm going to take a flashlight to someone who lost their lights. And I was like, okay, like that just sounds weird. Like people don't speak like that. And I was like, that just sounds weird. And I was like, okay. And then his next remark was, well, why are you doing your face like that? And I didn't realize at that point what I was communicating because I kind of forgot that I was on video. And I was like, oh, that just sounds weird. That's not usually how you speak. To which he replied in a very hostile way. What do you mean? What are you trying to say? I'm not lying to you. And I was like, all right, dude, like calm down. I was like, it's fine. I'm just saying it doesn't sound like how you would normally say things. So that continued for about 2 minutes. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to let you go because you're driving and you're tired anyway. So I'll talk to you later. What I remembered as I was hanging up was when people are tired, when people are hungry, when people's initial needs are not met, then we notice all types of behaviors shift. I notice this especially with like my sister and my daughter. I tease them and say like when they're hangry, or kind of like that Snickers commercial where they're like, oh, you're not yourself when you're hungry, have a Snickers. It's pretty much the same when people are tired. You tend to think more of that need before you do any other. So before I get into the next part of the conversation, I want to see or hear some more of your responses from the chat. And I saw a few of them coming through. Hi, we have a little visitor with us this morning, my handy dandy puppy. So I'm going to head over to the chat and see. So I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. Jacqueline says, I need to be able to better think on my feet in the moment. Shauna Lay says, sharing what I want when I make a call or text. Okay. Kenyofu says, I need to recall to myself what the objective is. Charmaine said, for me, I have to remove my emotions so that I can communicate clearly. Okay, so those are a lot. And that one about emotions was going to be my very next point. Wendy also says, when I'm the encoder or sender, I try to be direct and clear, but I tend to overthink and rabbit trail. Yes, sometimes when we are fishing for words, there can be a bit of that, what I call verbal diarrhea. Don't succumb to that pressure. It is, it's endemic in us in terms of how we tend to feel like we need to fill the space. Don't feel the pressure to fill the void. Rabbit trail is kind of like trail on. So you're just there like blah, blah, blah. And it just sounds like you're rambling a bit is a better way to say that. So the next part that happened is I go to bed that night. I'm thinking everything is fine. So the next day, not even in the morning, I didn't have to. So I reached out to him because I was like, I just want him to know, like, I wasn't trying to pry or get into his business or whatever. So he usually jokes with me, and the joke with him is often that I'm too serious and I'm too structured, and that I can't take a joke, and I'm sensitive and I'm emotional. And yes, I am sensitive, and yes, I am emotional, but not for a good joke. It's for mean-spirited teasing that I don't usually like. So I call him up again on video, and I was like, hey, and he kind of gives me this like look, like tentatively, what is she about to say? And I was like, so did your girlfriend appreciate you bringing her that flashlight last night? And I'm literally like laughing as I'm saying it, because I'm like, it's obvious, he's dating someone, but doesn't want to say so for whatever reason. And then he literally like flips out on me. When I say like flip out, like complete 180 from how I know this person to be. And he's like, you know what? I don't have time for this. Why would you say that? And I was like, whoa. And he was like, you're being really ridiculous. I don't understand. Why should I have to tell you if I'm dating someone? And at that point, I literally switch into communicator mode. So Shawnee, if you could switch to the next slide for me, please. Yeah, you're grimacing, Adam. I was sitting there like, what in the world is about to happen to me right now? So when that happens, I was like, okay, he is super emotional, right? My first tip is always use someone's emotions as a signal to think things over. So then I take a step back and I start to listen as openly as I can. And then I get clear on my intention. And I'm like, we'll call him Kevin. So I'm like, whoa, Kevin. I was like, I just wanted to let you know, like, I didn't call to antagonize you. Like, I called just to say, I wanted to be funny and just see how you were doing. Like, I know you said you were taking a flashlight to someone. I was like, but that's not usually how we communicate with each other. So I was a little nervous about why you felt like you had to say that. And then in that, knowing who my audience was, I was like, dude, I'm just joking. I'm like, this is how we usually talk to each other. So I reinforced the point that this is us. Then he continues, he's like, but you don't understand. Like, I don't understand why I have to tell you if it's a man or a woman. And I was like, number one, you don't. I was like, I'm just trying to understand why you feel this like hostility. I'm like, what's going on? So I tried to come from that place of respect and empathy, and it just wasn't going where I wanted to go. So at this point, I was like, you know what? It doesn't even matter what happens as a result of this conversation. Like, I really just wanted to make sure he understood. So at that point, I was like, let me detach myself from the outcome, because if I continue down this trail of wanting to make sure that he understands where I'm coming from, we're not going to get anywhere. Can you go to the next slide for me, please? So then at that point, I'm like, okay, I decided to say exactly what it was that I meant in clear and in no uncertain terms. I was like, dude, what's your deal? I really just was calling to joke around because I know you said you were tired, and I just wanted to make sure that you were okay. Like, I'm like, what are you hearing when I say that? So that's where I asked for playback. And he's like, no, because you're asking me, where did I go last night? What did I do? Never asked any of those questions. So then at that point, I start the over communication. I'm like, Kevin, I never asked you where you were going. You said you were tired. I was wondering if you were going home or, if you were headed out. That was it. I didn't ask you who you were going to see, what you were doing. I was like, but you know what, at this point, I just want to make sure you get what I'm saying. I was like, and every point that I'm speaking, so I'm trying to use very short, clear words. So the KISS rule, keep it short and simple. And he was not biting. So then I said, okay, so I knew talking on the phone wasn't going to work. Video chat doesn't seem to work. And again, disconnecting myself from the outcome, I disconnected the conversation at that point. And I was like, whatever happens, happens. And I have not spoken to him since then, which I've been a little annoyed, but also like laughing at the same point. And while it's not terribly funny, it just goes to show that misunderstandings can happen at any point. And I use myself to say, like, even though I work in communication, I communicate daily, I teach communication, even with me and people with whom I interact with, there can be misunderstandings. So before I started this conversation, even with the joke, when I was thinking about calling my friend, what I said to myself was the following: what do you want to say, Réal? Right? And I was like, all right, I just want him to know, we're all cool. And I did want to tease him and let him know that it was okay for him to say that he has a girlfriend if in fact he does have one. Why is it important to me? Because our friendship is important to me and we have a really good friendship and I want that friendship to continue. And he seemed frustrated the night before. What do I need from this person was another question that I was asking myself. And it was, I needed him to understand that we have a good friendship and I care about him and I wanted to make sure that he was okay. And then what I hoped to get from having the conversation was understanding. Unfortunately, those things did not happen. And so, as I say with almost everything in my life, you have to be willing to walk away from a situation and not feel tied to whatever the outcome is and be okay with that. And while losing a friend feels like a death in and of itself, it is something that is very real, but who knows what'll happen, and we'll see. But I say that to say it's okay, completely okay, for there to be misunderstandings, and depending on who the person is or the audience is that you're speaking to will determine how much you continue to communicate afterward. So now, because I feel like maybe I went too far with the teasing, I really don't think I did, but maybe I did from his perspective. But I'm like, this is how we communicate what has changed. So it's usually now the onus will be on the other person to open up if they so choose. And so that's something I look forward to if and when it happens. But in the interim, all that I can do is make sure that what I'm doing, what I'm saying comes across well. So I'm gonna head back over to the chat and see if I see people in here. Yes, I love all the laughs and yikes, because that's exactly what it was that I was feeling. Jacqueline says, I need to learn the art of the pause. The art of the pause, honestly, Jacqueline, is like one of the best things that you can do, because it allows you to really sit and reflect in your thoughts instead of doing the rabbit trail or trailing on or rambling the way in which Wendy mentioned that that's how she tends to be afterward. So what I want to do now, I did want to mention in terms of how you communicate with intention, right? As I was saying, and I always will use myself before anyone else, and I forget who it was that mentioned earlier on. She said, when talking to her partner, she tends to think of that person's feelings like first and not necessarily convey what it was that she wanted to say. And what I wanted to share from this example that I gave is, although I wanted to get a message across to my friend, what I realized through that interaction was I tried to focus more on what I wanted to say to make sure that he understood where I was coming from. But what I could have done was probably do a bit more focusing on how he would have taken it. And what that said to me was there was probably something else happening in the background, which, as much as I would like to think I'm a psychic, I'm not. But as much as I wanted to get clear and convey my intent, I was not fully aware of whatever it was that was happening to him. So that was some of the barriers that I was talking about in that communication model, as well as some of the noise that was taking place that prevented the communication from going through as clearly and effectively with the intent that I initially wanted to have. So, that was Jacqueline. Thank you, Kinyofu. So in the chat, I see Adam says, every argument isn't worth trying to win at all costs. That's what I got out of this. Correct. And that's the thing. It's like, I didn't even realize we were arguing, but once I noticed it was going in that way, that's when I was like, all right, it's not important to me to be right, but are you hearing me? And the point at which that communication for me broke down was when I said, don't you want to hear what I have to say? And he said, no. Okay, great. And he said to me, is there anything else? Nope, this is the only reason why I called you. And he was like, okay. And then he started to go into the argument again. And I did something that I am a little ashamed of, but at some point, like, you have to protect yourself and your own energy. And I hung up. So it was like, if you don't want to hear what I have to say, but what you want to do is yell, then talk at me, that's not communicating. And I wouldn't recommend that for everyone else. So I decided to take myself out of that situation. So yeah. Adam says people put their egos and arrogance above what truly matters daily. Very true. Very, very, very true. So before, oh yes.
Oh, I wanted to jump in. You know, deep how this goes sometimes. But yesterday when I was doing the facilitators training, the focus was communication and doubling. It's a technique that I've been using for like 15 years. It comes from my work as a psychodramatist or therapist, healer. And I'm like, I don't want to take the session left, but what keeps coming up for me in this glaring way is how both of you, in my view, have underlying communication that has nothing to do with the words that are being spoken.
Yes.
In my view. And I've had situations like this before where someone that I was involved with intimately is now a friend, and there's debris from the relationship as intimate partners that slips into our, I keep saying, doing air quotes, our friendship.
Yeah.
So for me, when you say exactly what you mean, from the previous day, I'm curious, was there thought, rather than to tell the joke, to actually ask a direct question? And I know he was coming across like really sensitive to what you were saying. Or not even ask a question, make a statement about concern from the day before. And because you mentioned fatigue and that he was driving, even that to me was like, there's something more going on.
Yeah, no, I did. And that was the thing. I was like, hey, like, is everything okay? And he was like, no, I'm great. Everything's fine. But even in that, like, I knew he wasn't fine, but we've had it, to your point, because we were in a relationship previously and now we have a friendship. I feel like for him, it's awkward. For me, not so much. Because I'm always like, what's going on? Who are you dating? What's happening? And he's like, why do you always assume that I'm dating someone? And I'm like, not an assumption. That's why I'm asking. You know, I tell him like who I'm dating. But yes, to answer the question very plainly, yes. There was the thought to ask, and I did ask him because he said he was okay. That's when I was like, oh, so did your girlfriend appreciate it? And we're very silly like that with each other, which is why I thought it was okay. He does it to me way more than I do it to him. But clearly it wasn't there for that day. So.
Thank you. Yeah,
no problem.
I'll say this really quickly, that in the doubling piece, it's to say the facts, and then also at the end, the other part of the exercise is to say the unspoken emotion and thought. So I'm like, there's a bunch that was going on energetically and that was in the air that wasn't expressed, you know, but he might not have been open to it. But I was just thinking about it. I'm like, there's something else going on, which makes the jokes and what you would do normally not normal anymore. It's convoluted with this other thing, but you know, that's very what was on my mind. So I just wanted to share that.
I appreciate that. Yeah. No, very much so. If we ever speak again, I mean, that's my plan next time we talk, to actually say like, hey, what's going on? Like, are you uncomfortable talking to me about these things? Would you rather we not? But even for me, like, a boundary has been crossed because, and that's just separate and aside from this topic, when someone crosses a boundary, I now have to deal with them differently. So from the crossing of that, we can no longer go back to who we were. there's going to be a different interaction. And we do a lot of work together also. So I'm like, that's also going to be interesting. But yes, so even in that, my exchange with Shawnee just now, in thinking of how Kevin and I were communicating, what I would also like to add is we often have to go beyond the usual ways that we communicate with people to actually state what's important to us, as well as how we want to have a particular conversation, especially if you're having feelings that you want to express or that conflict comes up, like in this example. When you're stating something with intention at the beginning of the conversation, then you can take responsibility for the reason you need to have the conversation. And even in previous conversations with this person, I'm usually very clear upfront with what I want to say, how I want to say it. So it's literally, this is often how our communication goes, as I tend to want to over communicate because I don't want to be misunderstood. And if the person who's on the receiving end knows what your intentions are from the outset, then you can help, then it can help them not react negatively. So he didn't really pick up on what my intentions were, which is why there was that negative reaction. But in a perfect world, and sometimes in an imperfect world, stating your intention can help to build positivity, collaboration, and trust. And as we go through the process of having dialogue, it also helps to set a positive and collaborative tone. So now, someone says, what is the assignment? Is there an assignment? So yes, there is a little scenario that we're going to go through right now. If Shawnee can go to the next slide for me, please. So now we have a little scenario here, just a fun exercise. I say fun, but you know, it should be interesting. So in this scenario, we have two friends and they're trying to make plans to go out for the evening. One friend wants to go out for coffee and the other friend wants to go see a movie. So I want you to take a few minutes and determine how these two friends can communicate with intention. Just think through what that interaction could be and jot that down. And then I want you to think of what the resolution could be. So what is the way in which each friend can communicate to the other their intention for what they want to do for the evening? And then what will a good outcome look like in terms of how they communicate that intention to one another? So we can take maybe like 2 to 3 minutes and jot those down. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look at some of the goodness that you all have shared in the chat. Someone said, where are we? Yeah, okay, so the last thing I read was from Adam about people let egos and arrogance get in the way. Io says, but he was blocking your communication, therefore he was putting up the resistance to communicating, right? So that's like that barrier that I was talking about in the communication model. And Jacqueline says, oh, to Adam, what if you're trying not to be in an argument and are just sincerely concerned? At what point are we being too pushy? Honestly, I would say, and I think I did this in that conversation, the point at which you feel like maybe you're being too pushy is if you ask and they rebut, and then you ask again and they rebut again. That's usually when I like leave it alone. Terry said, I asked, can we agree to disagree? Sometimes that's one of the things I say too, as a way of disengaging from the conversation. Instead of being like hostile, I'll say something like, okay, I think we just have a difference of opinion on this, or, you know, can we just agree to disagree and then move on to the next thing? Someone said, morning, in terms of changing their perspective. Oh, sorry. And then into the assignment. Okay. And then Terry said, I learned a person's perception is their reality, regardless of whether I see it as wrong or right. That is very true. That's something that I'm actually working with a politician right now on a campaign of his, and he's so focused on, but you know, what people are thinking and how they perceive me, that's not real. And I said, oh, contraire. Facts notwithstanding, perception is reality for some people. So it's really what you present And that's why you should be as authentic as possible, because in being authentic, then you can start to create the perception for people about what is actually correct. Okay, so Io says each person must truly express their desires, then give reasons for their desire as a way to lobby for that desire. Then give each other the feedback, and last, make a decision to compromise or agree to disagree. Okay, so is that your answer to the scenario, Io?
Yes, that's my answer to scenario number 1.
Okay, I like that answer. Anyone else have something similar or something different?
I'll just piggyback off of Io and say, sometimes if there's a situation where I want to hang with someone or do an activity, I may give an idea, but I'm not so attached to it. And so if the person wants to get coffee and I want to go to a movie, you know, I might ask if that's something that they really, really want to do, because I'm cool with either. Like, I would explore more with each of us, like how attached each of us are to the choice that we have, because for one of us it might not be that big of a deal.
Yeah, no, I like that too, and that's something that I often do. Louise said she agrees with Io, and Terry said I would ask, is there time to do both? Anyone else? Anybody on Facebook have something different or something that's the same as what has already been shared?
This is Amal. What I would do is just see, okay, well, if you want to go for coffee today, then maybe the next time we go out, we'll go for the movie, or get a compromise in that.
Absolutely, and all of those are great options. The one and the one word I think I saw early on was compromise. And that's something that tends to work well also, is trying to see how, if there's a way to do both, or seeing, as Shawnee had mentioned, you know, are you really tied to that idea? Jacqueline said, I would ask my friend if they want to just chill together or have a conversation. A movie does not invite conversation. We would negotiate. Yes. It's funny because this actually happened with my daughter and one of her friends. And I was so proud of her because what she said was she wanted to go to the movie, and her friend was like, I just want to have coffee and I just want to talk and catch up and blah, blah. And my daughter said to her friend, she was like, well, she's like, we can definitely do coffee. She was like, maybe if we, she was like, and then her friend said, but I really want to see a movie too. So my daughter eventually landed on, well, maybe if we do the movie first and then we can sit and have coffee, we can talk about the movie and then catch up, because we might be tired and the coffee will perk us up. So it was really interesting to see it. My daughter's 15, but it was a good way that I was able to see, oh, wow, like she does listen and she is, you know, thinking things through. And to Jacqueline's point, a movie doesn't invite conversation, but, you know, if you do want to just do something, then that works. The other thing that I love is what Shawnee mentioned is, are you really tied to that idea? And, you know, maybe we'll do what you want this time, and next time, you know, we can figure out something else, or we can do X the next time. So those are just some examples of how you can communicate with intention. What I find is in personal relationships, family, friends, loved ones, partnerships, we tend to feel a bit more closed off, not closed off, although that's the word that keeps coming up. We tend to feel a bit more gun shy than we would normally in our everyday life, to say what it is that we feel and what we want, just because we don't want that other person to feel like we're not considering them, or to come across selfish or something like that. Okay, so we're gonna head over to the next slide. And this time I'm going to ask you the question of, how do you communicate with clarity? And some of you have already answered this question for the intention question, and those same things still hold, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say for this one. So feel free to drop in the chat what you think you can or should do to communicate with clarity. And I see in the chat a couple of notes already. Jacqueline said time is definitely a factor with respect to the previous example. And then Terry said, I also realized that sometimes when folks want to see a movie, they may want company, but do not want to talk at that time, or working their way through a conversation. Yeah, that's very, very true. So how do you?
I'm sorry, before we move on, I know Kay Sweetness had her hand up from the previous share. So is it okay
Okay.
to?
No, absolutely. Yes. Sorry, I didn't see the hand.
It's okay. That's why we're here to do this together. All right, Kay, if you can unmute. All right. Are you the chipmunk again, Kay Sweetness? There was a time when she was sharing the other day, another session where it came out like Alvin and the Chipmunk-ish.
That is so funny. I thought that was a baby. I was like, oh my gosh.
At first I did it and I remembered. I was like, yeah, this happened to her before. So let's move forward and then we can see if we can bring her back in once the sound clears up.
Okay. No problem.
All right,
so what do you think we can do to communicate with clarity? Feel free to drop your ideas in the chat. And so, Safia, I hope I'm saying your name right, Safia. She says, communication with clarity means actively listening and restating at times what I've heard to ensure I got the message right. Jacqueline says, pay attention to body language. Love is love says, in my opinion, I would imagine being as clear as possible in your intentions allows for clarity. Yes. And okay, so moving through to the next slide, those are definitely all of the things that you can do to communicate with clarity, as well as, can we go to the next slide, Shani, please? As well as these tips. So the first thing is eliminating unnecessary phrases and vague words. So sometimes, again, we want to fill the dead space with things like someone says, oh, what time will you be here today? Oh, I'll be there soon. I'll be there early. Those are kind of unnecessary. Like, I will be there at 8. I do not like this. How does that taste? It tastes okay. What does okay mean? Do I look nice in this? It looks, pretty good. That's not really clear, right? So you want to be as clear as possible and eliminate those unnecessary words. Rakia says, possibly mirroring back what we said to you. Yes, mirroring. Oh my gosh, couples therapy. That was one of the things I learned early on. The mirroring technique, and I use that a lot. That, as I was mentioning previously, that's kind of like playing back what you heard. So that is definitely something that works well, because you get to hear how the person decoded the message that you were encoding, and then you can say, actually, what I was trying to convey was X, or yes, that's exactly what I wanted to say. You also want to use simple and clear language, simple and clear messages, so that way your intent comes through as clearly as possible. And specific words, right? Does this look good on me? No, I don't think that color works well for you. Yes, that color makes you pop. No, that shape or silhouette doesn't work with your figure. Yes, it enhances your body. That's one of the things that we can see. And depending on the relationship you have with someone, it can determine how they accept that. Another thing that works well, and this is something I have to remind myself of often, slow down, because I tend to speak really, really fast, and it means nothing to me to keep talking fast like that. But I notice when I talk fast like that, sometimes it becomes unclear, or it doesn't allow the person to hear everything that I'm saying. Shawnee said, we have been trained to be vague to avoid conflict and to circumvent being held accountable for not fulfilling a commitment or expectation. That is so true. One thing that I noticed actually a couple weeks ago at work. So I have a colleague, and I've been at this company for just over 3 years. And when I first joined the company, it was almost as if she just wanted to make my life miserable. My very first conversation with her, she said to me, I get that you're here to do communication, but I've been doing communication in my region for almost 15 years now, and I don't intend to give that up. Great. I don't want you to give that up. I love having communication partners. I'm just here to support you in communicating as clearly as possible, as well as setting the standard for what global communication looks like at the company. Well, I don't need that. I already know what I want to say. And, there's nothing that's going to change. Great. I'm so glad that you're comfortable in how you communicate and that people in your region are used to that communication style. I just know that we're undergoing a business transformation. And one of the things that I've been asked to do is look at how we can augment what currently exists, as well as streamline things to make sure that things are going to be much clearer and effective in the future. Now, I use a lot of buzzwords, which as I was doing it, I was kicking myself, but I also didn't want to say what I was truly feeling. So then I said, to be completely honest, I don't think the CEO is quite happy with the way in which communication has been working, which is why I was hired to make sure that I can put some best practices into place. And I will find out from you what your best practices are, and then work with you to implement those along with some others so that we have great communication across the board instead of just good communication. And in doing that, I did eventually gain her respect, but she still now tries to circumvent certain things. So it's really about making sure that I find out from her, and this is where the listen, not hearing, actively comes in. What is it that you truly want to happen? Is it that you want to play a more active role in communication? Or is it that you found that other communication methods don't work? And I find for me at work, I can be much clearer and much more purposeful and intent in what I want to say and how I want to say it than I am in my personal life, which you would think that with people that you're closer to, it would be easier. But no, we hold their feelings so much closer than we do that. We want to hold their feelings so much closer than we do with people with whom we don't know that well or don't have that close of a relationship with. I just want to go back to the chat here. So Jacqueline says, my husband tells me that I'm being manipulative when I question him about things. I'm often trying to get him to say the unspoken. So Jacqueline, I'm also a person who's very focused on semantics. So when you say question him, what do you mean? Are you questioning as in asking questions to clarify intent, or are you asking questions, and I'm going to use air quotes, as an interrogation? So if you can unmute and just share.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
I think it's a little bit of both. It depends on what we're talking about and what the
Okay.
situation is. Um, and I guess I come across as I'm not believing what you said. So let's try to go through the back door and see if you'll change your answer. And I know that I'm being manipulative when I do that.
Okay.
Other times I really just want clarity, and I really just I may have noticed some body language. There may have been some silence. There may have been some anger, unspoken anger in the
Mhm.
room, and I just want to get to it. And at times he doesn't want to go there. So we've been in therapy doing this back and forth. So
Mhm.
I know that it's that I don't want to deal with it right now. I don't want to have this conversation, and no matter what you say, I'm not going to respond. So it gets there.
Got it. Okay. I mean, that does happen sometimes, and it's interesting because especially based on how we were raised and socialized, based on how we were taught and trained, asking questions comes across very differently. I personally, and before I even give that comment, I just want to take note that it is 8 o'clock, and I know a lot of people tend to have to drop off for work. So I wanted to give you that opportunity now to say au revoir, bientôt, And thank you so much for tuning in. But I did want to recognize that we are at the top of the hour. The person in my life with whom those questions usually go off like a lead balloon is with my mom. She hates being asked questions, no matter what the question is. I could call my mom and be like, hey, how are you? Why are you asking me how I am? And I'm like, okay, is this the West Indian in her that's coming out? Because I also know West Indian people don't like when you ask them questions. And I'm 100% West Indian, so I can tell you, like, this is a real thing. So I'm like, what is going on? Or I'll be like, oh, what is that? Why do you always have to question me? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is how you create connection. So with my mom, I often will say things like, and it sounds manipulative, but I know I have to reverse engineer. So I'll often say things like, oh my gosh, I just got a such and such. And she's like, oh, I got this too. And I'm like, oh, how are you liking it? And then the conversation flows from there. If she feels like she's in control of the conversation, then the conversation flows very smoothly. But if it comes across as me asking her questions, then forget it. Like some people in here have done, I did Be the Tree, and one of the assignments like later on was to find out your birth ecology. Legit, the day I got the assignment, I had to call my mom and be like, mother, and I only say that to her when I know I need something and she's probably going to say no. I go, mother, I am going to have to ask you a series of questions. It's probably going to take about an hour. I just want to let you know, can we pick a day that works? So I literally have to prime her from days ahead so she can do whatever her process is to mentally prepare. And that is often how it works for her, for me to be able to have those questions. So I share that in, if there's something like that that you could do with your husband, Jacqueline, and I don't want to supersede or circumvent anything that you're doing in therapy, but maybe that could help, because my mom and questions, so I totally understand. Terry says, when my partner or son are silent, I say to them, when and if you're ready to talk, I'm here. And if you only want to talk and not seeking feedback, ask me to just listen. Yes, that's something that I've done too in relationships. I remember in my first relationship, I started reading the book Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, because I was like, what am I missing? I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, I recognize I grew up in a single parent household, so maybe I don't understand this man-woman interaction thing. And that was one of the pointers to say, I'm okay to just listen. Let me know if and when you want to talk. Sweetness says, hearing is hard, listening is not so hard. That's interesting, Sweetness. Can you explain what you mean by that? Because I would almost think that the opposite is true, that hearing is easy. We all hear, because hearing is a passive exercise, whereas listening is something that you have to actively do to make sure that you can hear something. Oh, it's sounding a little distorted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the chipmunk again. It's okay.
Okay.
Okay, you're gonna have to type your response in the chat because your sound is impacted this morning again.
Dr. Bashara says she's trying to get fired. Child, she's been here so long, she is not fearful of being fired. She's trying to get everybody else to move so that she can do all things herself. I'm convinced that that's what it is, because it's not just me. She's like that with everyone. So Shawnee said, sometimes I'll share what the person's commitment is, even when they are giving shade or expressing frustration. I love that you checked in about your colleagues, true commitment rather than getting caught up in her attitude. Yeah, because if I get caught up, then the Bronx in me comes back and Réal from 1999 comes out and nobody likes her. Nobody. Ayo says, my husband stays in his head planning what to say, but not actively listening. He used to didn't speak much. Now he interrupts instead of listen. He tells me what he thinks I'm saying, and he speaks with very vague words often. When we struggle with communicating, what resources do you suggest could help us out? I would say in that instance, because I tend to be a very cerebral person too, and often people who are very cerebral, and I've been noticing this, not scientifically, this is just me doing like a check-in of people that I talk to, I tend to notice we do interrupt, and the way it's received is you don't care enough about what I'm saying to listen, that you just want to get your point across. But I think what actually is happening is because we're up here so much, we finally are checking into the conversation. And so that's the way that you show that participation. And what people like us who are very cerebral need to learn is that comes across as being rude. No one likes to be interrupted. So it's just, I would say in that instance, when you notice he's being very cerebral and he starts to interrupt, you can say, is it okay if I finish my thought? And then I will give you the opportunity to speak. It feels weird. And I've done that too. And when people do that, I'm sitting there, I'm like, but I'm gonna forget. And sometimes I do forget. Sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't. But I think that's one way that it can help in terms of allowing you to finish your thought and express what it is that you're feeling, but also acknowledge that he's checked into the conversation. Stacy said it's all their past and what they see as respect. Yes, very true. And then Shawnee said, I love that you mentioned this, Réal, because sometimes you're in communication with someone who is operating from an entirely different mindset and structure regarding communication, and their attachment to that can make it almost impossible for you to engage in generative conversations. Louise said, using what I call the Jedi mind trick. Yes. 100%. Sometimes you do, like, you have to, in your mind, say something that you think, say something in a way that makes it come across as it's that person's idea. And I feel so bad for doing it to my mom sometimes, but I know that that's the only way we can have a clear and open conversation. Because if I truly come from a place of authentic communication with her, and not that I'm not being authentic, but if I take the stance of leading the conversation, she feels in her mind that even though I'm 42 years old, that I'm still this like 4-year-old who should like fall back into her place. So that's the role that she wants to play. And sometimes I let her and sometimes I don't, but you know, it either works or it doesn't. Teresa said, when a person is silent with me, it gets on my nerves badly. Why, Teresa? Do you feel like they're ignoring you, or do you feel like they're just choosing to disengage?
I feel both things, that they're ignoring me and choosing to disengage, and to just, disengage. Also, my friend said to me that sometimes to keep from saying whatever he's going to say to me, you just be silent. But I told him, I said, the silent aggravates me. So why you just can't say what you got to say if that's how you feel about it? If you want to say something, I feel like I'd rather for the person to say something, because and it's not just him, but anybody, they could be silent for like a couple of days, and that just aggravates, because I just feel like I know they want to say something, but they're not, they don't want to say it. So it just aggravates me. So it just makes me like back up and don't want to be bothered. And I'm sorry, I just want to like say, the hell with your ass and get away from me. That's how after a while, that's how I start feeling.
No, and I can understand that. Sometimes for some people, silence is uncomfortable. What I had to learn about silence is you have to accept it. Well, let me rephrase that. Not that you have to accept it, but in absence of the other thing, which is the talking or the quote unquote noise, it's what your reality is. So unless you're willing to bridge that gap to close off the silence and actually open up communication again, then it is something that you're choosing to accept. And for me, I tend to be a little bit of a control freak. So I would want to jump back in there and be like, hey, what's going on? Blah, blah, why aren't you talking? To get to answers. But it's also a way that I've learned it takes different people process things in different ways. So it takes people longer amounts of time sometimes to be able to process what has happened. So even though we may want to get to the eventuality of talking again, that's where I've also learned that you have to be detached from the outcome. So while silence can be uncomfortable, if you know, and I think, I forget who mentioned, let me see if I can scroll back up quickly. Someone said, I check in with my partner and my son, so Terry, and say, let me know when you are ready to speak, and I can just listen at that point. And that oftentimes does work. So it all depends, and there's so many different like techniques and tactics that you can use that it's really just a matter of feeling out what works in which interaction. And sometimes it's literally like you're playing bingo or something, seeing what lines up where to know how to communicate, or not communicate, but how to, what aspect of communication will work with what person. Stacy said, oh, that was not, that was about sweetness. So Jacqueline said that not actively listening part though. Me too, Teresa. I find it so isolating and controlling. It is a form of control. When people feel like they don't have other options, what they can do is their silence. So what the other person could be doing is a couple of things. One, taking the time that they need to resolve in their own mind what's going on. Two, opting out of the interaction because they either feel uncomfortable or don't know what's going on. Or three, they could just be using it as a way to control and manipulate. And what's going to break down that silo is how you choose to engage or interact as a result of the quietness. Sometimes quietness is just quietness, and sometimes it isn't. And again, for me, it depends on where your boundary line is, how you're choosing to accept that and what you're going to do afterward. I don't want to say more than that because sometimes, you know, it can be a bit personal, how people are feeling or things like that. Terry said headspace folks communicate when they're trying to get out of their head. Yes. What about writing down what you want to say? Sometimes that works very well too. I had an interaction with a couple friends of mine. Was it this year? I want to say earlier this year, or maybe it was end of last year. I can't remember. And one of them, she literally had like 6 pages of notes of things that she wanted to say. And so she literally wrote everything down, but because she was anticipating I was going to react a certain way, but because I just sat and listened, she didn't even need to go through half of what she wanted to go through. So writing it down does help to get it out of your head and on paper and focus. To some people, it can look like an attack or manipulative, but it often isn't. And you can set the intention of, I hope you don't mind, but I took the opportunity to write down a few things because I just wanted to make sure that I come across as clearly as possible and that you understand what it is that I'm trying to convey. So you can almost use that as a positive instead of a negative. Sweetness says, I come to a place where I can hear what is not being said. However, to listening without having voices in my head while listening is hard. Listening without having voices in my head without listening is hard. Yes, I can understand that.
Before you move on, we have 2 hands and one of them is Sweetness. I don't know if she's able to share. So Sweetness, you're gonna come off mute and share something maybe that has not been read from the chat that you wrote. So let us know if you're able to do it this time.
Is my big girl voice here yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the grown-up person has awakened. All right, so grand rising to everyone. What I wanted to share was that I'm alone a lot, and so when I'm listening to learn what it is people are having trouble with as far as communication with me.
Mhm.
And so an incident happened. My sister, I've been asking for a lunch date with my sisters. And so for years. So supposedly that came up a couple of weeks ago. So my sister called me and said, I'm inviting you to come out to the pool so we can spend time, me, you, and mommy, and my other sister. So I checked inside of myself to see if I was able to go, and I was not. And I shared with her that I was not. So now I get photo. The photos didn't come directly to me. They were on, I think, Facebook with other people who were there. And so I was under the impression it was going to be that time when we was getting together to deal with some things, to iron out some things, expose some things. And so I was glad that I did not go. And then I checked myself to make sure that I was clear on, what this invitation was.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did not I'm gonna use the word confront because I'm a confronter. I did not confront my sister about, well, I thought that that was supposed to be a gathering for us. Why was cousin so-and-so there? I did not do that. So I'm finding that I'm okay with myself because I know what my intentions were, and I found out that I was clear about the communication as to everything. So that's what I wanted to throw out there, is that sometimes for me, my experience is sometimes I don't have I don't have the time with other people because I'm clear on what my intent is and I'm being clear on sharing it. However, they're not so much. They're manipulating the situation to get me to do what they want to do, which is show up. Continue to show up for everybody but myself. And so I was glad that I was able to show up for myself and not go.
That's awesome. I love that, because sometimes the act of not doing something can convey and communicate with clarity and intention as much as the act of doing something will. So I really like that. I see Stacy also has her hand up.
Grand Rising, Queen Réal. You look awesome in that color.
Thank you
Hello,
so much,
everyone.
Stacy.
You're welcome. So I actually, this goes back to the silent part. I heard you mention like different parts of why people are quiet, but there's something that I didn't hear, which was, and I'm not the quiet person. However, the stuff that, something I didn't hear was when some people are being quiet, they actually can have fear. There can be some fear there of, wow, am I going to be heard, or whatever the stories they have with that person. Like if I say anything, they're just going to speak over me, or I might as well just shut up. What I have to say isn't valid or important. So people are dealing with also whatever that part of them being quiet is. And because they do it so much, they're fine with doing it. But on the other person, it lands for the other person like, they're still not going to say anything. Are you kidding me? So they're irate on the other end, but the other person could totally just not know how to actually communicate their feelings, or whatever they have going on inside doesn't have them give them access to actually voice it. And then something what I could see about like being quiet is when some people are quiet, it definitely can be manipulative, because that's also their way of communicating. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. And even I've coached people where they have like partners, and I'm like, so what did he say? Because the goal was to get an answer. And they're like, he said nothing. But I was like, so what was your next communication? Because oftentimes some people, they let that just run the show, because they're like, oh, that person's quiet. And they get frustrated. But I coach them to hang in there so they can get an answer. So don't just be like, because they're used to you. Susie's not going to ask me again. I'm just going to shut up for 15 minutes. She's finally going to shut the F up and give me my way. But it's like, okay, if you ask them a clear, concise question, like, okay, so when are you going to have the rent by the 3rd? Like, have something that's more clear. So they have to answer. And I also tell people, shut up. After you ask the question, especially to the person who's always silent, stop. Don't talk anymore. Now they're quiet, you're quiet. I don't care if you're uncomfortable with the quietness, just be quiet. And then when you're just sitting there quiet and they still don't say anything, hi, I did ask you a question. Is it going to be by the 3rd that you will have the rent, or is there a different day? It's a clear question that they have to answer. So, and if they don't answer, I mean, but by that time they get an answer. But I don't know, like after, if they don't answer, I would just ask them, is your throat feeling okay? Do you need to type or text me? Like, I'm going to get the answer. So that this way that they can also get, oh, there's something going on for the other person. So I just want to bring up those.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. And the list wasn't an exhaustive list. Sometimes there are even other things going on as well. It definitely is based on the person. And if, for example, like sometimes if I don't talk to someone for a long time, and I've done that, especially with the example I gave with my friend in the beginning, I'll go months without speaking to him sometimes, because I'm like, okay, so you did X and I didn't like that, and that was a boundary. And it sometimes goes on from there. So you have to determine how or if you want to respond. I think Charmaine said in the chat that she is master at giving the silent treatment. Child, listen, if there was the Olympics for the silent treatment, I would have won gold about 25 times. And sometimes I realize that that is toxic, but sometimes it really is, you just have to stop. Right now, I'm not speaking to one of my sisters because she said something that, like after our dad passed, that was just so egregious. And I was like, she's serious? And I was like, you know what? I said, she's a fragile person. What I won't do is say something to hurt her. So I just need to disengage for a while for my own peace, my own sanity, and everything else. But sometimes silence can be good, but sometimes silence can be bad. You just have to determine when to use it and not weaponize it. I think when the intent is to weaponize or punish the other person, that's when silence is bad. But again, it's all how someone is going to interpret what it is that you're saying, how they're going to take it on, are they going to accept it? And sometimes you just don't know. So I just want to wrap up because I know time is coming pretty close to an end. Shawnee, if you could put up that slide that begins with number 7 for me, please. I think it's
definitely.
And then I'll just run through those last bits and then I'll have some closing words for everybody. And then we can, and if we have any additional questions or comments from there, we can go forward. Couple other things in terms of how you can gain clarity is ask questions in a number of different ways. So what my favorite thing to do when I talk to people and I'll say, I don't understand what you said. So like even in the example I gave her, I was like, you're going to take someone a flashlight because the person, and I'm like, so why do you not feel comfortable saying this? Oh, you said the sky was blue. Did you mean blue gray? Is it cerulean? And I'm using very flowery language, but you can really, instead of just saying the same thing the same way, think of a different way to say what it is that you're saying to be able to get the type of response or understanding that you are looking for. As I was saying before, don't fill the void. Be okay with silence. Often when we're not okay with silence, that's when confusion can creep in. Know the point that you want to achieve, but again, don't be so attached to the outcome. So know what it is that you want to achieve and speak in a way that's going to get that point across, or will get that, elicit that information from someone else. Limit yourself to 3 main points. Usually if you have more than 3, people tend to like tune out. And I know I have like 12, so I understand, but think about which things are gonna resonate with something like this because we're all so different. You wanna give as many different types of pointers. Focus on behavior, not personality. So I always say, arguing is healthy, fighting is not. Arguing, you can uncover behaviors. It's when you attack personality that it goes from arguing to fighting. So don't talk about someone's personality, just talk about the behaviors. And that's another thing that I picked up in therapy. When you do X, it makes me feel like Y. So that way you're focusing on what has happened and not who did the action. And then when all else fails, just like with computers, and I think that was one of the comments to Sweetness, just start over, Control Alt Delete. And in real life, you can Control Alt Delete too. You can, and I do this often. I often go like this. Okay, I feel like I'm not coming across very clearly, so I'm just gonna start over and let me try this again. What I was trying to get across was, and then I launch into what it is that I'm actually trying to say. And that often helps things. You know, we never know how things are going to land. Sometimes what people say, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, whatever interactions, whatever feelings, whatever emotions, all of that plays into how people are going to respond or react. And what we're hoping for is a response and not a reaction. But often we've been trained by society to elicit reactions, even though what we don't want is confrontation, but what we should be opting for is a response. Sorry. Okay, down you go. Just to close things off, I had another scenario, but I think we had so much good conversation. We don't even need to get into that. But some tips for communicating with clarity. You want to find out what's getting in the way of how you're communicating. So 3 things I would say to make sure we can communicate with clarity is, number 1, start with why. Why are you communicating? If you can get clear on why you're having this interaction, that will help to bring through clarity. If you're communicating because you want to get an approval, if you want to get someone on your side, just think that through and determine why this interaction is happening. The second thing is determining how you're going to communicate. Are you going to do this face-to-face? Are you going to do it over email, over text, video call, in person? How are you going to communicate with the person that you want to communicate with? The mode of communication matters almost as much as what it is that you're going to say. Because if you're going to do something that's through, excuse me, through email or text message, computer-mediated communication does not allow for tone and nuance and can often go misunderstood. And then last but not least, you want to focus on what it is that you're going to communicate. And if you can look at those 3 pillars in terms of why you're communicating, how you're going to communicate, and then what you're communicating, you'll often find that communication flows a lot easier, that clarity is allowed to come to the forefront. And then last but not least, you can make sure that you are doing so with intention. So start with why, determine how, and then figure out what are the 3 pointers. So that is all I have for you folks today. We do have a little bit of time left, so I want to go through and see what other points are in the chat here. Rakia says, having missed a conversation using silence, it can be slippery. Oh, I don't know where it went. Oh, I lost it. Okay, it can be a slippery slope because there may not be another opportunity. Then you're left with the what ifs. Yes, and one thing that I learned, Rakia, from doing a lot of therapy is sometimes you have to be okay with not having closure. We want closure, we crave closure, but sometimes you have to be okay with just not getting it and understand that that is your closure. It's great when we do have it. I feel a lot of people feel like sometimes they get closure and they just have more questions, which often doesn't help either, because then it creates this perpetual cycle of needing and wanting more. But you have to be okay with not having it. This, which I'll drop into the chat, is a guide to helping you communicate with clarity and intention. And what it is just pointers to help, like, in the moment, because if you're like me, you may be a bit OCD and you need something sometimes, and you'll have like your notes up. And I find that it does help quite a bit to have something. So I just dropped that in the chat, and hopefully you all find it helpful. Ao said, oh, thank you so much, Ao. This subject was excellent and communicated so sensitively. Thank you for the training. You're absolutely welcome. It's so funny. I was telling my sister, I was like, I'm going to do this talk on communicating with clarity and intent, and I'm going to use this example. She was like, nah, girl, that's too personal. And I was like, I don't know how to be any other way. I was like, that's me authentically. I was like, I literally just show myself as an example. So I'm so glad that you felt that way. Sweetness said, coming into a conversation with wanting to make a point is not healthy. No, it's not so much wanting to make a point. It's wanting to make sure that you are understood and that your message is being conveyed. I think sometimes that make a point has like a negative connotation to it. And it's not so much like you have a point to make, but that you want to convey your sentiment. And it's okay to want to convey your sentiment in a way that is positive for you as well as whomever it is that you're talking to. Terry said, yes, Charmaine, I had to realize that when someone says that to me, they are saying that they heard me, but may not be ready to answer. Yes. And I think that's referring to silent treatment. If that's wrong, Terry, feel free to correct me, but I think that's referring to silent treatment. Sometimes it takes people a while to process, and we all process differently. Like me, I think I became a master at like thinking on my feet, because I would get in trouble when I was little for all kinds of things. And I say little, but I mean like 12, 13, 14. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, why is she mad? And I would have to like think so fast, lightning speed. So I just learned to be able to think in the moment, to be able to answer. But I think for a lot of people that doesn't necessarily happen, and that's okay. And it's okay for you to say, wow, you shared a lot there. I need a little while to process. And sometimes processing is a few minutes, and sometimes a few hours, and for some people a few months. It really all depends, and there's no right or wrong. We just have to be cognizant of how that will impact, or how the other person will perceive your silence or lack of communication. Charmaine said, using these 4 tools will help you to communicate with clarity and intention. Adam said, great work, everybody. Sometimes the basic things can be the hardest for most people. No, that's real talk right there. Silence can be a whole day workshop. Yes, Daisy, that is very, very true. Niamo Nancy said, fabulous info and reminders I need. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. And Teresa, you're very welcome. Sweetness said, I am talking about making a point, not conveying. There are times when people have a point, they want to make it and have you accept it. That is what I am speaking about. That's a closed mind when you only want to make a point. No, that's very true. When all you have in your mind is that you want to make a point, yeah, that can be a bit negative. And it's up to you if you want to engage. That's one of those times where if you notice that that's what someone is doing, you can decide for yourself, is this where I'm going to create a boundary and disengage from the conversation, which is completely healthy for you, then you can definitely do that as well. Luis says, in the past, I've been argumentative because I've wanted people to understand and agree with my perspective. I felt the need to defend myself. Over the past few months, I've been able to breathe and be okay with the fact that someone doesn't have to understand my point of view, and I don't need to defend myself. Let them believe what they want. Yeah. 100%. And I was coming from the same way too, which is, I feel like I was drawn to communication for this reason, because I was actually going to be a mechanical engineer. And I stumbled into communication, and it has helped me tremendously, really like process and uncover a lot of things. And I realized I used to be very defensive, but again, because I got in trouble a lot for things that I didn't feel were my fault, I realized that I had to pull back from feeling so defensive all the time. So Rakia, and with Rakia's comment, we will close things off. Rakia said, this conversation is a good start to my day. Thanks to stars, blessing to you today. And thank you, Rakia, for that. And thank you all for tuning in. I'm glad so many of you found this helpful, and I'm glad we engaged in such good conversation. The conversation isn't over. If you want to ask me questions, if you want to talk communication or marketing, whether it's marketing for your business or whatever, or if you want to talk, the best way to communicate things, feel free to reach out. I have a scheduler on my website, which is just my name, realhamiltonromeo.com. So feel free to visit, and you can book in a 30-minute complimentary session and ask me whatever else you want to ask me. I'm also on the interwebs and social medias, so you can reach out to me there too. I am on Instagram and Twitter with the handle @Réal is my name. Trying to think. I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to connect professionally, so feel free to do that also. But again, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for a great chat this morning. And I believe we wanted to, there was another slide, Shawnee. Did I miss that one?
Hold on one second. There are plenty.
Oh, it was just my contact info. So this is my contact information. This is literally my phone number. If you dial it right now, well, I won't answer now, but it'll ring. Like I said, Twitter and Instagram, Réal is my name, and my email is réal@realhamiltonromeo.com. And then I think the next one is the love offering slide. Let's see how good my memory is. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, yes. So if you want to send a love offering or a donation, you can do so via Zelle or QuickPay to sowleadershipdevelopment@gmail.com, via Cash App to hashtag Spirit of a Woman, and use code number 415RHR. And then I think next we have, if you want to get some, next up, on Sunday, September 19th, we will have A.O. Handy Kendi facilitating a session on the power of the breath to ignite positive energy. I love it already. And if you want to get your woo swag, here's how you can do that. Oh, no, I was one early. Dang it. So we want to welcome all new members and newbies to the Woo Nation. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know we love new people. As it says here, Woo is a community where we come to learn, elevate, and ascend. So continue to invite people so we can grow. And then I think the next one is the swag one. No, I'm going to stop guessing now.
Okay. Right. You don't have to. We right here. We got you. Go ahead.
So the schedule coming up, we have some Zoom live workshops on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 7 to 8:30. And then on Mondays and Wednesdays from 7 to 7:30. And the Zoom live workshops are on the live workshops are on Zoom. We stream live on Facebook, and you can get alerts by texting Woo Nation to 74121. And now the swag. Clearly, I was really excited about the swag, and that's why I kept talking about it. If you want to get any of this wonderful Woo swag, including masks that we're still wearing so fashionably, go to bit.ly/Woo swag, and that's WUE swag. And thank you very much on behalf of the entire Woo Nation. Just want to say thank you, stay in touch. Be sure to register for future workshops at bit.ly/Wake Up Movement. Join the Woo community on Facebook, as well as on Instagram at Wake Up Everybody Virtual. And subscribe to the Woo channel, type in bit.ly/Woo on YouTube. And if you have questions, just send an email to info.wakeupseries@gmail.com.
All righty, family. So just wanted to say this for the 28 awesome, wonderful souls that are still in this space. We are always interested in having volunteers join the Wake Up Everybody volunteer team. There is loads to do in reference to the execution of the production daily or 5 days out of the week. There's all of this stuff that's happening to make sure that when you land in the space, what you receive is powerful, is clear, has integrity, and is operating from a foundation of love and an intention around ascension. So we're asking that you share your talents, your abilities, or if you're willing to learn, communicate that clearly, like we were taught this morning by Réal, and let us know, and we will welcome you into the team. Some of us have been reaching out to folks just to make sure that we're covered in the morning. So if you're interested, please reach back out to us, because we want to make sure that this session is covered by 2 or 3 admins per morning, and you have an awesome team. And you can get fatigued by waking up every day and delivering. It's a powerful thing, and we still are human beings that require rest or breaks. So we invite the community to consider jumping in so that we can train and develop you so that you can support the execution of this powerful work. So thank you for the consideration. You can drop it in the chat now if you're interested, and one of the admin team will catch that, or you can reach out on the Facebook page, whatever you choose to do. And the email that we gave out earlier is a way to communicate as well, or to contact us directly. You have my number, Kinyofu, Charmaine, you can let us know. But please do consider. All right, so we're going to take this down, and I'm going to put this in gallery view so that we can experience the faces and the energy of the entire community. While Réal for her share. So unmute if you would, everyone.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Réal. Thank you
you.
so
Réal was
much.
wonderful.
Thank you,
Coming
Rio,
in
for
and
this.
just listening was exhilarating. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
your very
Blessings,
helpful
family. Y'all.
Everybody.
for giving
Thank
us
you.
very,
You have a wonderful day,
very
everyone.
enlightening. And it helps me to evaluate where I am and how I can
So,
improve. So thank you very much, Réal.
Love
Thank
you.
you.
I love y'all.
Thank you, Réal.
Hi,
Yes, yes.
Charmin. I miss
Have a
you.
great day.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Hi, Teresa. Hi, everybody.
Thank you, Réal.
Mwah.
Thank you, Réal.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, yes, y'all. Have a
Thank
blessed
you.
day.
Thank you,
Hey, Adam.
Shani. Thank you,
Hey,
Réal.
Mwah.
thank
Thank you,
you.
thank you,
You
thank
have a, you
you.
guys have a wonderful day, and let's move
This has
forward.
been really great.
Yes, yes, yes.
Love y'all.
See
A
y'all
wonderful, blessed
Peace
day,
soon.
and
everybody.
blessings. Have a wonderful day.
Everybody have a
Thank
blessed
you,
day.
Réal.
Use the tips. Let's have
You're
good
very welcome.
communication.
Yes, 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 yes. Hey, Teresa.